I was surprised that, that's why I say calling you up about
Oh,
it
yeah.
originally, because I didn't put it in. I was really, I was kind of shocked when I heard Keystone did.
Oh, and you're, we did amazing.
Hello.
Hi, how are
How you
you?
good?
Oh, no.
You got caught in the scaling on 70, and it's funny because I work on that project, so I've been like, and I used to joke as,
Oh, no.
hey, your inconvenience is our progress.
Yes.
It's a great way to put it. And I was just thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't go over well, but
This is,
We got heroes out.
you did good.
the good news is they're finished, so going home will be last page, I guess.
For the day.
For the day. Yeah. 13. Come on, this population knows that it's a multi-year project.
No, but I mean, eventually the scaling will stop and.
No, it'll turn to plastic.
Yeah. Scaling turns to plastic. It's like drinking turns to dancing.
Yes.
This same one?
Yep.
Yep. I don't know where they got, I mean, they said $51,000. Emily sales tax.
I think a long way to avoid scaling, and it was a very pleasant.
Yeah.
It's Brett.
Hi.
Colors are still good.
Colors are beautiful. Not as what they were last week. When I got here, I was anticipating for that, the delays, and I didn't have any. And so I was here about a half hour late early, and I just went up.
Nice.
I took a couple of photos, and it's just, it doesn't.
Interesting.
It's like, it's just that feeling, and it's so beautiful.
Last weekend was.
Oh, I thought, so I want to ask, what
Have a, oh, we don't, okay.
IGA looking for a special tax,
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
public safety,
Hey, girl.
if
Hey there.
we're not taking that out of the park.
I noticed that.
Oh, and we're going. Areas, we'll discuss it, probably
All right.
Hi.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea.
Maybe they're looking at
assault.
combining.
Mics are hot, so whenever you want to start. You know. Megan is gonna be
Yeah, I know it's all
It should just
open.
be right down the street,
It's all
so let me
open
know.
image.
IGA proposed Spain, I think,
Okay.
and
I'm in the queue.
hoping Peter's on.
Term,
What
get a 5-year term.
we need to straighten up now.
Yeah, they got stuck too. They just got here. So did you, oh, you were past.
Hey there, Jeanette.
Okay.
Need to straighten up.
I live in the place that sort of has, no
Yes.
matter where it's going.
Got it, brother.
Side of it.
Lucky, lucky.
We're gonna go over.
Unless you need to
no.
cross Colorado Boulevard on a
Sitting there,
business,
so that
then you're
is
stuck.
yours. My
That's
Did-
true.
You should have seen Georgetown last weekend with everybody trying to get off the path.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, are you?
Our methods. Idaho Springs residents who got our methods.
Wild eyes in here.
They're thinking about leaving papers.
Yeah. I saw a video that-
Not really.
Makes sense.
Like,
I haven't moved.
Hey, Megan, is Peter on Zoom?
Tenth of a degree on the dial.
No,
No.
No, he's not yet.
Sure.
Megan, will you make Mike Anderson a panelist?
Yep.
Is that the only thing?
You need a pen?
Thanks.
Let me know when you guys are ready and I can share my screen.
Um,
Or do we want to wait?
no, I think we're ready to start.
Okay.
Ready to start? Let's do that.
Ready to start.
I need Peter.
We do need Peter for the first thing on the agenda.
And the-
Well, like he's provided the red line and so we can actually talk about it. Or we can, well, I think we need to start the meeting. Right?
Okay, so let's see here. It is Thursday, October 3rd. It's approximately 1 p.m. It's the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Technically, this is also our interjurisdictional meeting to discuss the future of the fire department. First thing on the agenda is public comment. Right here for public comment?
Not seeing anybody raise their hand online.
Okay, I am going to close public comment. Thank you all. We're now sitting as the Emergency Services General Improvement District Board of Directors. The only thing on our agenda is a joint meeting with the municipalities and the Fire Authority Board to discuss fire protection and emergency response. Jonathan, I hand it to you with a little bit of explanation first that Peter is not yet online. He got stuck in traffic. His plan is to,
Failing I-70.
something like that.
It's done now. It's over
Yeah.
for the day.
He's not trying to get physically to Georgetown. His plan is to go to the wellness center and just get on via Zoom so that we, save us 15 minutes. Jonathan, my question for you, is there anything else on the agenda other than the IGA? Maybe we can take up first.
Yeah, and so Laura and I here, we could do, so the idea of, there are three things, I think, which is review of the IGA language, and that's particularly the board of directors and the funding parts. And you see those from the new edits from last time. To review those two sections. So then we're assuming that there's going to be support for this. And then the question is for all of the entities, what's the plan for approval that you have? So we want to assuming that we're doing this, what are the next steps for you? What are those timeframes to do so? And then an update on the community survey piece as well. So those are the three elements of today's meeting. This has been great meeting like this. I think that at least the plan was that we're going to try to put a cap on the IGA language and set you off on your responsibilities to work with your other electeds around the approval process. And we're hoping that today really is the cap. So I do want at the end, Laura and I were talking about just wanting to have a kind of some sense of acknowledgement of the group, assuming that we get there and wrap up. So that was the plan for today. Do you want to start with the plans for approval? Let's assuming that while we're waiting for Peter
Or maybe even the survey.
or even the survey.
Not sure we have anything on the survey, do we?
There's a survey update.
Yeah, I just got your handout from last time.
Right, but I'm not sure there's anything, because the team has not met since we met last.
Okay.
So there are no
That's just anything-
updates on
Is
that?
there anything from your conversation with Bill you want to share?
Yeah, I can burn 30 seconds. Had a conversation with Bill Ray to explain the two comments that came out of this group, out of this last meeting. I haven't seen how that has changed the survey. It's not going to change the survey substantially, but and the summary of those two comments is we really want to emphasize early in the narrative that this is 5 jurisdictions coming together and working well together. And that we've been thinking hard about this for a while. He did comment that sometimes when you start talking about process, you can expose yourself to unreasonable process expectations. He has context from other communities that have said, we've been working on this for a year and here's our solution. And some feedback being like, well, why don't you work on it for another year? So how am I doing? 60 seconds?
Maybe I'll ask about, because I think the idea is that the community survey will really inform the funding levels, what's palatable, and so, I think one of the questions in terms of reviewing last meeting's notes were as well as a sort of like, we know that I think the first agreement of this group was that we need more funding. And it's outlined in the mission CIT piece. The community survey really informs the level upon which that would, and so I'm stalling for time here. I just want to clarify. I think that's, in my mind, that's what we're trying to do with the survey is really to inform that level, and we're moving from to the better, not to the best, and not certainly at the equal or to the status quo. So, is that right? Okay. How about approvals? Let's in your mind. There's Peter. Peter, you're right on time. Impeccable.
You just saved Jonathan.
Yeah. We were just talking. So is there anything else about the community survey? Any questions about that? Do we have a sense about timing, about when after the elections?
Okay.
All right, one thought from me, actually, through Beth, from Beth through me. What does this group think about incentives for people filling out the survey? Incentives for filling out the survey, gift cards, chance for a gift card? Any thoughts on that?
It does increase. I've seen it.
We've used it at the school district and the foundation, really good.
What have you done? Mitch?
We've done gift cards. We did, all of these don't apply to this group. One, we had a survey of parents, and parents could select their teacher to then be eligible for a gift card.
On this?
And the teacher that got the most points in each building got a $500 gift card for classroom support. We've done other ones with parents where, if our goal was getting a 40% response rate, we did like the first 30% for each building got a smaller gift card.
Okay.
$10 doesn't seem to move people. $25 and more does.
Is there any way we can think of that, depending on how we do the incentives, that they will have and that they will somehow compromise the objectivity and the usefulness of the results of the survey? That they'll pull a certain percent, or they'll do something that won't be reflective of the community at large? And it's not a criticism, it's just a question.
I'm not smart enough to answer that.
Me either.
Could be a question for the survey
For
consultant.
Bill Ray
Yeah.
and company.
Is there comfort in the room with me having this conversation with Bill or us? The team.
Worth asking, yeah.
Your goal is to get as much participation as you can. Granted, that's objective and from their perspective, and so that's an option. I have an idea. Maybe it's not your favorite teacher, but maybe it's your favorite IGA party that you want to nominate.
Your favorite county
Party.
nonprofit.
Yeah, could be something like that.
Mhm.
We'll plow your road first.
Wow.
Would you put a cap on how many certificates you're going to give out? What if everyone for a change decided to respond? Can we afford that?
These are the things.
Good
Questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there, I guess I'm just curious, is there a taste in the room for an incentive program related to the survey? I think that's the extent of detail needed today. Sounds like yes.
Knowing what might help responses, whatever it is, maybe some options.
Or are you setting up the county to take the bad rap that we're wasting our money, spending it in this way to encourage people to respond? They care, they should respond. True. And is this one more, why don't we give that money to the fire authority instead?
Yeah, no wonder we need more money if we spend it like that.
That's right. I'd hate for it to backfire.
Maybe there's a third party that would like to play.
My only concern was just that if there's a manner, and I don't know enough to know, I'm asking it as a question. If I knew the answer, I wouldn't have to. It's difficult in a small community to engineer something like this and even find a way to make it a truly random sampling. And I wouldn't want to make it even less random.
Well, how about you explore it with Bill, just and with these questions in mind about like what's the overall message about, frugality, about use of public funds? Does it actually move the needle in terms of participation? At what level? And then sort of the idea kind of report back. Is that okay? At least just in terms of for George and Annette.
I think it's worth asking the question. He was very candid at other ideas too, when we throw something out and he'd say, that's probably not gonna work. I've seen that in other communities and here's what comes back. So if the feedback is immediately, no, people are gonna think you're wasting money, they'll tell us right away. So I don't think it hurts to ask and get his opinion. I'm sure he'll have some experience.
Okay,
Colton also has his hand raised.
take it away, Colton.
I just want to mirror Randy's concern. I mean, I've never been one who's written the surveys, but I have dealt with a lot of their data. And if you mess up what you're incentivizing, you can skew your responses to particular demographics, or you can receive lower quality responses because people just burn through it because they're just interested in the incentive and not the question. So I think a very specific conversation with the consultant on this is warranted, because we don't want to go through this process and then end up with data that's really skewed because we didn't think through our incentive. But it does increase the rate, no doubt. But sometimes you end up with more of a worse thing. So you just need to be careful.
Okay. Fair enough. I think Bill will kind of have some ideas, and then you all can come back and with these perspectives and anything more on that.
I just want to thank Colton for volunteering to participate in that conversation.
Nice. Well, Peter, welcome. And thanks for your edits. And to the document, of course, we're focusing now on the sections, the new changes. I appreciate when Peter sent this out, he put all of the changes in one document and then the new changes in this one. And today, my understanding is that we're really focusing on the board of directors and that appointment nomination process for the 3 new members. And then the funding and talking about the annual meeting itself. And so I think, again, as we've talked about before, we want to project it onto the screen and kind of work through it. Today, we do want to have, we want to make sure that we have the edits, the specific words edits, and we'll understand if there are issues or challenges with specific words. So we're at that stage in the process where we're doing that. And Peter, I'll turn it over to you in terms of a bit of context about how you took on this task and from last meeting, and if we could share the screen, that would be great.
Okay. So let me share the screen.
And everybody has copies of that red line version in their room, right?
Yeah, we're looking at number 2. Correct?
Number 1, I think.
It's saved as clean, partially clean working draft. So yes, it's kind of the second document that was attached.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Oh, number 1 is the red line though.
Right.
Well,
Number 1 is the one that's.
The one that does not have
They're
any
both
red lines is the one we're working with. At red lines, meaning if you look at the whereas clauses at the beginning, if you don't see any red lines, that's the one we're working off of.
Yeah.
We've
So number
taken-
two.
We've taken what we've agreed to thus far, and we've accepted those for the sake of clarity of
Okay.
looking at just at the point of red lines. So on that.
They begin on page 4, I think.
Begin on page 4 on section 6.
Right.
Sake of, yeah.
So you should be able to see this on your screen now. We're at that section, the CCFA Board of Directors. You'll recall that last time around, I had actually put in information that really wasn't what the intent of everybody was, because I was making every member a nomination. So I've corrected that. And now have the 11 members that we are planning on, and point out in section 6.1 that the ESD shall directly appoint 2 members. So that's clear. It has that similar ability as Idaho Springs and Town of Georgetown to appoint 2 members. And then separately, it shall also nominate 3 other members, one from each of the unincorporated areas of Clear Creek County. I go into within ESD boundaries. We still need to put together that Exhibit B. So that'll come. I know Jeremy had provided a map. I just would like to make sure that we work with ArcGIS to get it in the best form for this. And then I'd like the board to be able to, I mean, not the board, excuse me, all of you to be able to look at it and make sure you're on board with the map. And then I talk about how the nominations are considered for appointment. The board makes the determination, the board of the authority. It's subject to their approval. And I talk about if indeed the board doesn't act within nominations in a timely manner, that they will automatically go into be considered accepted after 8 weeks. I'm pretty sure that was the general intent of everybody. The 8 weeks is something, if you want to determine if you want it sooner or a longer period of time, if the board of the authority doesn't act on a nomination, just let me know and we can make that edit. So that would be one question that's out there. Down here in number 7, you'll see the board's.
Peter, could we hang on there and just make sure
Sure.
that?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's appointing 2 members. ESD is appointing 2 members. They're nominating the 3 new members. The Exhibit B, the map that's been referenced, will be confirmed as we move along. And then those 3 members will be approved by the board. And then if the board does not act, then it's the 8 weeks associated with that. So that is accurate based off of my my notes from last time. Any disagreements with that about that's the idea that the ESD basically doesn't get to just pick 5. It's 2 to nominate, appoint 2, to nominate 3, and then those 3 are approved by the board.
By the other members of the board.
By the
By the-
appointed members of the
By the
board.
appointed members of the board.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
I have 2 comments.
Please.
In this section. Paragraph 8. I think the intent is not that the ESD.
George, can I just interrupt? I understood that we were actually not getting there yet. I was going to get to those sections. Are we
Yeah.
done with 6.1?
Yeah, thanks.
My
So,
apologies.
no, I mean, so I just want to clarify, is that the group's understanding?
That, it was mine. There was some talk at one point about, yeah, I'm fine with it if that's where we're at. And everyone agrees with that. There was a point at which we talked about would those people would there be involvement of some official body that represented each of those 3
Mhm.
geographic areas, but I don't know that.
Whether that's
That's
the homeowners association or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
I don't think that's doable because you got to pick one out of those regions and out of those areas. So it doesn't make sense. I would just state that in 6.3.
Hang on, we're still on 6.1.
Okay.
Any comments about 6.1?
I have a quick question for the current members of the CCFA board. Is 8 weeks enough? How often do you actually meet when we're not doing this? Do you meet once a month? And if you don't have a quorum 1 month, You literally have one meeting to evaluate a nomination. I'm just curious about the timing, knowing the boards sometimes don't meet like you expect them to.
Thoughts, George? You're on the board, I'm just curious.
I could live with 12 weeks. 12 weeks would allow for, they would have 3 opportunities for the fire authority board to meet and consider.
We're gonna be at the next meeting or something like that. I mean, you don't need them till you have a meeting.
You don't need the new people to have the meeting, yeah,
You-
so
you-
it doesn't,
The first time they serve is at the meeting, if they can be approved when the meeting comes,
yeah,
and you solve the problem.
yeah.
The 12 weeks? Is that okay? Peter, I hear an appetite for having just a little bit more flexibility related to 12 weeks. So that'd be give three board meetings. Okay.
Is it,
Seven?
I thought Randy was about to ask a question about 6-3 or somebody.
Sorry, 6.
There's just Scrivener's error, just the town, the second word towns needs to be singular.
Yes, there is. Thank you.
I love that term, by the way, Scrivener's
I
error.
learned it from, I don't remember where I learned it.
Jeffrey Chaucer, I think, or something like that.
Perfect.
7.
Number 7, I think, was agreed to by everybody, which is that the board members that are appointed by each of the parties serve at the pleasure of the governing body of the party that appointed them, and they have terms of 4 years. I have it as a party may reappoint a member to successive 4-year terms. I did not think we placed a limitation, though, on the amount of successive 4-year terms. So I wanted to clarify on that as it relates to the appointed members. Do you want a term limit on that?
I don't see any reason to put a term limit on that. It limits your choices.
yes.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Concur.
Okay. So keep 7 as is,
Okay.
the red line as is.
So number 8 is a little more where I question, I filled in what I thought were gaps in my understanding. I looked at various notes from the meeting. The 3 board members that are nominated by the ESD and appointed by the board, I had put here shall serve at the pleasure of both the ESD and the board. That was so that I could jog my memory to ask you, because my initial impulse was to say serve at the pleasure of the board, because it is the board that is appointing them. I didn't know how candidly ESD felt about that, because it would give that responsibility to the board to leave somebody on there or not. So I thought I would get, that's my first question, if we could start there and kind of at least get that determined, how we'd like to see that.
Whose pleasure are they serving as?
What I recall offering, somebody correct me where I'm wrong, was that they serve at the pleasure, once they're appointed, they serve at the pleasure of the fire authority board, and only the fire authority board can remove them. Therefore not the ESD board.
So the ESD doesn't have the ability to replace those 3, is that correct?
We nominate them. If the board confirms the nomination, then they're there for 4 years, and the only people that can remove them is the board itself. Not the ESD,
Within those 4 years.
within those 4 years.
And at 4 years, then
We can renominate.
we could renominate at that time and decide we wanted someone else at that point.
That's the second sentence, but so
So
the
the-
idea would be here that the appointed by the board shall serve at the pleasure of the board, not of both.
Correct.
What if they resign midterm?
The ESD would just nominate a new appointee.
Is that spelled out in another section?
It is not, so if, I mean, I believe the intent was to follow, it would go back to the process of their original nomination, but I certainly can add language that refers to that process and notes that. So if doesn't finish term.
And would that member complete the term of their replacing, or would it be?
Yeah. Okay.
First 4 years, yeah.
So that's a great segue. So that would be the first question would be, is that how you would like it? Is the new nominee to finish out that term of the original appointed nominee?
Right.
Or to begin a fresh 4 year.
I think my preference is to have it not restart the 4 years, have them finish out the term, and that's just because it's a little bit easier administratively to know every 4 years we've got to reconsider nominations.
Yeah, I would agree.
Otherwise, they'll get
Yeah.
out of whack and we'll start to lose.
Same.
Yep.
Same.
But every 4 years, then you could be replacing those three nominated, and that's how you want, that's how you see this.
It could be set up on a
So it could
rotating.
be a whole clean slate coming in of those appointed positions.
I would-
As opposed to staggering them.
I would think a better way to do the 4 year term would be to have some kind of stagger 2 and 1, or even I mean, you've got 4 years to work within. That way you don't have a complete turnover of, a third of the institution suddenly.
Okay, so two questions. It sounds like one is that there's an idea about finishing the term to be replaced, right? So that process would be used to if you finish that term. And then the question is about staggering so that every 4 years. And that to me is another question for this group about your preference.
Wouldn't be that hard to make one of the initial term appointments 2 years. That way you have a stagger in the system. Then you replace one cycle, you replace 2 the next cycle, because Randy's right. You don't want to lose
All the
everybody at the same time, because there is a learning curve to any board that you're on.
Yeah.
Getting up to speed, and you just don't want to sacrifice that just because you don't want to.
Similar state boards I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Oh, you're fine, Randy. Go ahead.
No, I am. I need to be less impatient, more patient, whatever. On state boards I've been appointed to, when they start a new state board with a statute or something like that, they assign some of the people to 2 year terms and some to 4 year terms at the outset when you first start that's all. Then it just rolls through.
The same model could apply to the larger municipalities as well, since they're each appointing 2 people.
I mean, in my experience, we've never done both at the same time. Simply because, I mean, it could happen, but it hasn't. We've replaced one when one decided not to continue. So
you're questioning kind of the necessity of.
we could, just to make sure that you've always got a rotation in there.
What do others think? Those springs.
I think it makes sense to have a split, a rotation, 2 years, 4 years.
I agree with that, and so I think a couple of questions. One is, no, we don't want it to, in a vacancy, we don't want to restart the 4 years. We want them to finish out the term.
Yep.
We do want to stagger them. We want to do that by making one of the three, initially a 2 year term. Maybe it's for the last nomination made by the ESD board. It's impractical to think that we would make 3 nominations at the exact same time. And so the last nomination we make would be appointed for a 2 year term. Does that seem like a way to make this functional?
No one's disagreeing.
Yeah, I mean,
My guess is that once we sign the IGA, and if it goes into effect immediately, we might make those 3 nominations really quickly.
That's the design.
I just would point out that if you make that third nominee 2 years and you don't get around to appointing that person within a decent amount of time, then they're going to end up running against the end of somebody else's 4 year term. So hopefully we can do it within 2 years would be the goal. You'd want it done within a few months of the others appointed, so that that person can serve essentially so that their next 4-year term, assuming they're renominated, does not start close to when the others will start. If you follow what I'm saying, if you don't appoint that third nominee, the nominee that you are appointing to 2 years, and you just wait and wait and wait, eventually you may be into the first and second appointments, their terms, their 4-year terms, then the stagger won't work as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what if you declare odd years and even years so that they're still within the parameters? So if the board is dragging their feet and finally appoint someone after 12 weeks, term is already started January 1st of whatever, and set the parameters of the terms as opposed to when they come on over. So that there's some urgency, so that you're not delaying an appointment because you have an upcoming issue, or you aren't rushing an appointment because you have an upcoming issue, and that's the guy or the person.
What do you mean because of an upcoming issue? What do you mean by that?
Well, if the fire authority is considering some change, request, whatever, something that they have that you have a possible candidate that is either for it or against it, and you're rushing or delaying an appointment so that that person can't have a vote. So why not just assign the term, take that part out of it? Why don't you just assign the terms? First term starts January 1st, 2025. If you're saying there's urgency to appoint these positions. 2 terms are gonna start January 1, 2025, and 1 term is gonna start, and then get your 2-year staggered in there somehow. Or set the end dates. And so then position 1, 2, and 3, appointment A, B, and C, and those are the terms. So whenever there's turnover, if there's turnover, they just assume it to that other, so you're not constantly looking at a calendar and saying, oh, this guy started March 1st, oh, this guy started July 17th.
You could probably simplify that just by saying terms are from January 1st and run for 4 years.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah.
I would think January 1st. And I'm not sure that inspiring, let me use a different word, that planning to point or not point someone in order to politically jerry-rig the organization is what we're trying to guard against.
Mitch,
Anyway, let's just figure out, I think I don't want to overthink it. Let's figure out how to appoint some people. And my hope is we can get everybody appointed. And it never even occurred to me to try to find the right person and appoint them according to something coming up in the next little while. I just hope to get them appointed before I'm gone, if we get this thing signed.
So there's agreement here about staggering the term. I think the proposal on the table is about, beginning with the January 1st date, having the last nominated member to be the one that has a 2-year term. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
And there's a sense of timeliness and urgency associated with getting them accepted, but I think that sort of the assigning the term to start on the 1st of January, that kind of solves part of that issue.
It does, except if you're nominating them, is the goal to nominate them well in advance, 12 weeks in advance of that start date? So the new agreement technically starts, of course, December 31st, 2024. So if the term began January 1st, 2025, we don't have the new agreement yet. Are we intending to be ready and offer these names before the agreement's even in place? Because it won't be effective.
From a policy perspective, I'm not too worried about what happens in the first 3 months of this agreement and whether someone's getting a full 2 years or a year and 9 months.
Okay.
Right.
I can totally, and I'm just speaking as one member, I can totally live with one of those appointments is for an initial 2-year term, some way to know which one makes sense. And I'm happy to leave it to Peter to figure that out. and that the initial start dates of those terms are established in the IGA as January 1. And I think that's how we make this work. Is that?
It does, yeah, and then we'll try to do the job, get them appointed.
Chuck and John.
My experience is it has
You have a board
more.
on January 2nd. If you need to make a decision.
We have. I don't think the other seats are being affected. The other seats, like,
These are for the appointed, the
Yeah.
nominated.
does that,
Yep, that's fine.
Peter,
As
from
long as
your,
there's really a board on the 2nd of January.
That brings up the question of quorum, but that's not until number 13.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, thank you,
ask about
thank
that.
you for holding on to that.
I wasn't there, but yeah, that's.
Peter,
that's
is that is that workable in your mind from an administrative legal perspective? This idea about there's one appointment for a 2-year term that's assigned on the 1st of January, presumably 2025. And that's only, and what's proposed here is the last of the 3 nominees that the ESD is nominating.
Yeah, I do absolutely think it's workable. I think I would probably add language or include language to the effect of that the term begins January 1st, even if the appointment is not made until, 12 weeks into that time period or something like that. In other words, these first terms essentially may not be the full amount of that term by the time somebody's appointed to it. So I would just be pointing out that the term begins even if the appointment itself isn't made by January 1st.
just one other little detail, it makes sense that that the current appointees, all of them, have their term start. We're acting like they're starting the first day of their first term on January 1.
Yeah, there's heads nodding in the room, Peter.
So my question with that is, since we don't have that language currently in there, is the intent when this IGA begins that the entire board's going to, except for, of course, the nominees, the actual appointed members are going to be formally reappointed at that time so that they shall all begin their terms, and that's why we're going to throw in the staggering language for the appointees as well?
I don't know how other jurisdictions do it. I think the county does reappointments. Mostly it's for the commissioners to various and sundry committees and other duties. Georgetown does it for selectmen, but also for all of the nomination for all of those appointee kind of positions. Usually it's at the first meeting or the second meeting of the new year.
That's what I was just going to say too. January 1 is, to have it done by then, we usually appoint in January in the first or second meeting.
Yeah. And our meetings are generally, the first meeting of the year is usually timely enough to catch, ongoing committees. I think your meeting's like the third.
Yeah,
third Wednesday, and ours is the second Tuesday, so.
We've only received a notification of appointment when there's a new person.
Sure.
So never anything for reappointments.
Right.
It just continues on.
Right. But we, as a Board of Selectmen, we're going through that appointment spreadsheet and saying, okay, are there any that we're going to change? Otherwise, they stay the same. So.
Okay.
We could be better at notifying you if nothing's changed, but we actually go through that process, so.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking we might be overthinking it just a little bit.
There's nothing wrong.
In the past, so in the current agreement, we have not staggered the terms of the appointees. We haven't really addressed even the length of the terms, I don't believe.
And the start date.
Right, so this would be new. We'd be adding some new language, and that's why I was asking do we intend to formally, make all these? Because let's say there's somebody who you are intending to appoint who's been in there for 8 years already, for example. Will you be attempting to, will that person's term, let's say, would end normally this year in April coming up? Would you be starting a new term for them? Are we starting from scratch in terms of the terms?
Yeah.
Peter, you do have 4-year terms in there. You said you didn't think you didn't think it addressed the length of the term. Is that what you
No,
said?
in the original.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, got
So-
it.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
What's your counsel, Peter?
it makes sense since we're in a way reconstituting the board, that we could just make the terms begin January 1st, do the same 2-year thing, say they will stagger. It's more just adding the language, but I think I can do it in a way that it won't complicate anything. And then once we have the language down, then each of the parties will be able to know exactly what their next step will be, which will be to basically reappoint. And one of those people will serve 2 years. The other person will continue through to their full 4 years. The appointments are all, as we've just determined, generally 4-year terms, and can be reappointed to as many as we want. So I think I can throw that language in there and it won't be an issue. And it probably is a good idea just to have it. I do have a question. If there are no term limits on the appointees, so we're fine with that. I have a question, which is in number 8, which is that the terms are 4 years, but the question is whether we want to term limit those individuals, or do we want them to have the same successive 4 years? And I mention that because depending on the answer, we will have to determine whether that person that's appointed for 2 years gets 2 full terms if you limit it to 2, if term limit it, 2 terms after that kind of thing. So, but let's first determine if we're there at this point, because I can definitely do the other aspect. If we are looking at successive 4-year terms for these individuals, will their terms be term limited? That kind of thing. In number 8.
I'm going to suggest that if we're not limiting the terms of the direct appointees, we not limit the terms of the unincorporated representatives either. And I wonder, well, let me stop there. I have a thought about paragraph 7, but I don't want to complicate this particular point.
So not limit the terms of the unincorporated as well. Anybody advocating otherwise? Okay, so that they can be reappointed indefinitely.
As they want.
Okay.
Okay.
7?
I wonder.
Before we move to 7, or just so in the instance that, let's say we are right where we're at, well, again, I guess it again doesn't matter, because if we don't limit the terms, then it doesn't matter if a 2-year term gets 2 new terms or 3 new terms at a full 4, because they can do it as much as they want. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on 8 before we jump back to 7? We can jump back, but we can't jump forward. How about that? Go ahead, George.
I think my intent in coming up with 4-year terms was to see fresh voices by all of the jurisdictions show up on the board. I understand the argument that if you establish hard term limits, it may make you hard to find someone. And that makes sense. I wonder if as an alternative to just a hard term limit, we can all agree that before we make a reappointment, we will advertise the opening so that a member of our community who's interested at least has the opportunity to get an interview and be considered.
So you're suggesting language in 7 about that party may reappoint a member to successive 4-year terms and with the, sort of condition of some sort of community advertisement related to that opportunity? Is that what you're thinking, George? That's not the right words, but.
That is what I'm thinking.
Do you want to do that? Oh, sorry. Just to clarify, would we do that right at the beginning? Would you do that for even the initial term, or do you want to do that after a certain amount of terms?
Not for the initial term, no.
Okay.
I guess I'm more of the mind that we leave that to each of the parties to figure out. I don't feel like I need to dictate to the commissioners how they appoint, where they find their peeps. And I don't think Georgetown needs guidance in how to find our peeps, so. We can handle it. If we want fresh voices, I mean, and that's come up. We've turned over nominations because we thought we needed a fresh voice on there, so.
Yeah, otherwise those fresh voices might become anachronistic very quickly.
I want to point you to the old number 7, which I've scrolled down to, which I had removed because we had set forth the process, but I'm happy to put it back in as well based on what Lynette just said. So just throwing that out, you can see it here, it's stricken through. Each jurisdiction may utilize whatever method of appointment it deems convenient and appropriate in appointing members to the board. That was in the original agreement. I struck through because I just didn't see its value, but now based on what Lynette said, does the group want that in, and in relation to what George was saying as well?
I mean, clarifies the, sort of that piece, use whatever method of appointment. Is it useful? Is it useful to include in there, given that comment, George's comment?
I think given that the greatest impediment for our even being able to get 3 people appointed quickly and in a timely fashion, and always to find appointments, is the willingness of people, the willingness and availability of people to even fill these roles. And we're increasing the number of people that we need by increasing the size of the board, which I think is a good thing, but it brings a challenge about that. So I think creating, when we have people who are serving well on a board, to automatically assume that because someone is there, it's time for them to leave and make way for new faces. It presumes that maybe you shouldn't have appointed them to start with. So if they come in and if you appoint them because you hope for a good job and they do a good job, and we struggle to keep board appointments full anyway, I hesitate to saddle us with that requirement to attempt to turn over often and quickly.
I'm gonna take a page out of Laura's playbook and let this one go.
That's Laura's playbook.
Laura, yeah, encouraged me to let one of these.
Was that you said?
This is Laura, right? Okay, so we're gonna just keep it as is, 7 and 8. Keep the former 7 about the methods to appointment stricken, and anything else on 8.
Wait, we decided to keep this stricken, or do we want to put it back in? Are you?
Keep it stricken is what I'm understanding.
Okay. Okay.
We didn't get an answer to that question, did we? About whether we wanted to insert 7, the old 7 back into the new.
Yeah, well, so what do you, okay, so it's still on the table. So each jurisdiction may utilize whatever method of appointment it deems convenient, appropriate. I mean, I think that's the assumption, right? That's what you're going to do. If it's useful to have it in, to include it back in, to unstrike it?
Well, if you leave it in, then you're not having to assume
Okay,
one thing or another.
no assumptions here. So let's put
Okay.
that, the old 7 back in.
Okay.
And just for clarity on number 8, Peter, can you kind of,
Sure.
I have a summary of what I heard, but I think it would be.
Let's hear what your summary is.
Oh, I heard remove, well, that the 3 board members nominated will serve at the pleasure of the board. Strike from the ESD, from that part of it. And then if seats are vacant, the replacement nomination will finish the term of the seat it's filling. And you're staggering the terms to start the 3rd nomination at a 2-year term, starting January 1st, and the first 2 nominations will start at a 4-year term, starting January 1st. I think that's everything.
That is what I have in my notes.
Okay.
And note that I'll be making a modification to likely 6.2 and 6.3 to address that we will be staggering those terms as well and the start dates for those.
Right.
Not on 6.3.
I was gonna,
Each only have one.
if 6.3,
No stagger.
No stagger? Oh, that makes my job so much easier. Thank you.
Sorry.
I would have wrestled with that for hours.
Cut us in half.
And let's not forget the Scribner's note.
Yes.
6.3.
Yeah, that goes along with chimney sweeps and sword sharpeners, and farriers.
Okay,
this.
so
Okay.
good discussion.
On 7, though,
Please.
sorry, the
Please.
7 that we're adding back in, it applies to the jurisdictions and the appointed board members.
Right.
Because there is a difference in how the nominated
Nominated.
people are coming in. I assume you are gonna have to. It goes in that weird gray area where, yeah, it's supposed to come from those 3 areas and you're probably gonna have to advertise to get them. But I just want to make sure this language doesn't apply to those people, because then they could just be picked at random. Then we have that, appearance of impropriety, even if it's not, that the county commissioners are handpicking people and they all come from what the commissioners want to choose.
From the
From the ESD.
geography.
Yeah, oh, sorry, yes, from.
It's honestly
They
true
still
for all
have
of
to
us.
pick.
All of us. You can say that about all of us. About handpicking people and putting them
Well,
somehow. It's the same
true.
for all of us.
Oh, I'm, please understand, I'm not assuming that anything nefarious is gonna happen, but there's also the appearances where there's already a little bit of tension that if it looks like the county is getting to choose 5 people, then you have a majority hang over the CCFA. I promise do not think that's gonna happen. But if someone thinks that this language is allowing that, we've opened ourselves up for that. I'm not sure how to fix it, just we have 2 sets of people that are gonna be chosen slightly different. I want to think about everything that could go wrong before we take this out to the boards who might think, wait a minute, how do we keep those 3 areas independent? When they're not coming from a group, like who do they report to?
Right.
They don't have a reporting body.
But the commissioners don't get to fire them. So
Well, that's
I would
true.
think
That's
they
true,
would be
yeah.
acting independently because they won't
Yeah.
receive pressure from them.
Once they're on the board,
If
they're there.
if the municipalities have fully appointed their members, then it's 6-5, so it's not a majority
Yeah,
on the county side either.
yeah, so not having them roll over every time maybe solves that. I don't want to say problem, sorry to be the one to bring that up, but.
No, I think to normalize this, I think with like one of the questions is exactly where we are on this
Yeah.
discussion,
Yeah.
so. Not to
I
not
want
to
to be able
cast
to
aspersions,
defend it.
not
I want
not
be
to
able
cast
say it's not
aspersions,
gonna
but
happen,
just to
yeah.
think about that, and I think Jeanette, that's a good.
Well,
question.
the number 5 is a reason to talk about it. My only reaction to it, and the reason I've reacted is it continues to arise in the conversation that what are we going to do to keep the county commissioners from rigging the deal, And I just want to lay those cards out and say it never occurs to me until I hear somebody say that. I'm like, well, maybe I could.
Could I jump, if I could jump in for a second, because this actually, Jeanette, I think you make a well-taken point, and kind of dovetails with what George had been suggesting about the advertisement, because perhaps we as a suggestion, we'll have that each jurisdiction may utilize whatever method of appointment it deems convenient as to its appointments, but maybe we then add for the 3 members who are nominated and appointed, those positions will be, advertised at each renomination period. We could do something like that. George, I thought you had kind of suggested kind of an advertisement way.
That is our policy right now for all of our appointments, is that when we have a vacancy,
When we have vacancies.
we interview for the appointment. I think it's best practice. I can live with it being codified.
We do the same.
That's what I was thinking a second ago, George, was that we do interview for reappointment each time to take a little, to instead of just like rubber stamping a name every few years, So at least we're stopping and talking to the person. They have a chance to talk to us about their time on the board and what they offer to us, in terms of advice or comment, and we do the same with them and make sure they want to still be there and they're not just doing it out of a sense of obligation that they have to or something. And so we go through all of that, and then we advertise when there's a vacancy, of course. And we should do that.
Even if it's a little redundant, it would be helpful to have the language in here. So if I'm being asked that, I can point to it and say, it's not just 5 people appointed. They're coming from those areas. It's being advertised. I can show that process, even though, you could question the process of the jurisdictions as well, or the municipalities as well, but I want to make sure this one doesn't get questioned since it's the new thing.
So to make sure I understand what you're suggesting, paragraph 8, we add that prior to renomination of the same individual, we advertise the opportunity to the members of that community. Is that what you're saying?
I think that would work. Simply because they're not coming from a group where they're always aware that they even have someone on the CCFA board to represent them. We know that in our board meetings because we talk about it. They're not going back to a board for St. Mary's. So how do the people 5 years from now, how does somebody new in St. Mary's even know that they have a representative on the fire authority board? So if there's not some way of letting them know, hey, this is your rep, it could get lost, whereas it's not going to get lost in the towns. We know. And that may not be a very elegant way of kind of going through that, but it keeps it to where that group, that community is always going to know they have that seat. Is this the right place for that? Does that make sense?
So it's prior to the renomination of unincorporated members, that there's an advertisement for that.
Does that make sense? I mean, I'm envisioning that would keep it in front of that community. I don't want to be the only one suggesting that. Does that solve a tiny bit of a problem?
Anybody disagree?
Without creating a bigger problem? Does that create an issue?
Peter, does that insertion create any issue?
No, I mean, from an interpretation standpoint, and I think the intent of even having those 3 positions, it makes perfect sense to me. I think the clarifying language would actually enhance this. So I think it's a good idea.
Great. Okay. Anybody disagree?
Nobody can disagree now because I went and said that. It would look.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are we ready to move on? Okay, so there's some changes from on 9. Go ahead, Peter, sorry.
Yeah, these were just clean up, changing some words, and it's a stylistic thing. I moved some language around. It doesn't say anything differently. I just think it flows better, so I made those changes.
Right.
Everything that you see elsewhere are literally things like that. I had to update the presence of, what constitutes a quorum. Basically, just so we're clear, a quorum is the 50% plus one. And I just put 6. That was easier since we do have an odd number to work with. That was really the extent of the changes. So yes.
We don't want this to be 6. We want this to be 51% of the sitting members.
There we go, yes.
So that vacancies don't make it hard.
Yeah, so the vacancies don't make it harder. for the
Okay,
quorum.
right. Thank you. Okay.
Right.
Sorry, 51%? Is that what you said, or
50
50%?
yeah.
One plus one.
Right.
So the concern that was brought up was that if there are vacancies, it makes it harder
Yes.
to have a quorum. And so it's for the seated members.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Perfect.
What's the term they use? 50 plus one is over 50%, basically a majority.
I pull the language from other bylaws that I have, so, because I've gone down that before.
Okay.
I'll make that change in 13. So that was
And is that,
yeah.
in a given meeting, is a quorum 50% of those who are there or 50%? The quorum is 50. Never mind. I'm thinking of something else. Scratch that one off. Try to forget I ever started to say it.
Okay.
So I believe that takes care of that portion, and we can move on to funding if that works for you all.
Well, hold on.
Can I be a bad
Yeah.
toad and push the go back button? before we do?
You can.
Sure.
I'm sorry I didn't bring this up last week. In new number 11, what value does the second half of the first sentence bring? I'm just not understanding it.
Except in the case of a tie vote.
Yes. No, this is yes, it's in the tie vote.
Right. Each member of the board shall be entitled to one vote on any matter that comes before the board, except that in the case of a tie vote, the matter shall be subjected to a revote and each party shall be entitled to only one vote. So it essentially takes us from, yeah. So
One vote to one vote.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
for Idaho Springs, that has 2 members would typically have 2 votes. But in the case of a tie, Idaho Springs as a party or Georgetown, the
Okay.
ESD as a single
Gotcha.
party.
It's designed to protect.
Thank you. I missed the party and the board differentiation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Let's
that,
move on to funding.
No, I think.
No, that's a
this-
good
this is
clarification.
Exactly what we want to do is to
Yeah.
make sure that we explore these again. Thinking about worst case scenarios is not suggesting you have bad intent around those. Let's keep bringing those issues up because I think this makes it stronger because you're going to go from here to your boards and these are questions that they might ask. John, please. Did you have a question?
I
Okay.
have a question on that, though. If it's per party, then our 3 nominated seats who are different areas, do they all get lumped in with the county then? We have 5 people that only have 1 vote.
so my interpretation, just to tell you, would be you've got ESD nominated / appointments, but those are still 5 ESD. And I would suggest that it's those 5 are 1 vote, but the ESD members that are sitting there in front of you may want to discuss this as to whether or not does that mean we get 2. But the problem with that is, just so we're clear, is then you can have another tie vote. It only be between among the parties, so that premise. Yeah.
This language is almost 1 year old, correct? This is not legacy language. This was inserted in the last round of negotiations.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Last year's.
And is there cause to just strike it?
Has it been utilized?
No. And what we were trying to do is make an improvement to the fact that the board had a perpetual even number of seats, and that's not the context.
I think,
So I think we just eliminate it.
I actually don't like it. Because part of it tells me the reason we added those 3 members was because the unincorporated county. So right there's a problem that I would say, well, then I would just say that the county gives up 1 of its 5 votes for the next vote. Because those 3 are actually are approved by the board and they're almost like parties unto themselves, representing those chunks of population out there. but it's still a complicated thing. I mean, and it's hard for people to wrap their head around that concept. And the other one is that we're just counting votes in the, the kinds of organizations that try to stay together and have collaborative, for example, we're going to have a consensus operation instead of a majority operation. So you have to stay at the table until you got consensus, and then you finally get some good ideas. You talk yourself hopefully into a good solution. And if we got a tie, I think you have to open it up and talk again and vote again after you've talked longer and see if somebody changes their mind.
Be a lot of voices to lose in one. If you lose 5 down to 1.
Yeah.
Seems kind of unfair to the 3 because they're representing a specific area, so they may have different opinions. So
It's clumsy, I think.
So what do you do in terms of a tie vote?
We remove
Ask them to try
consideration.
again.
Yeah, we remove consideration of a tie from this IGA and we let the fire authority board handle that.
yeah,
Robert's rule says that there's a tie, the motion fails. And then-
Right. A tie is a fail, and then you can go back to the board and discuss it if you want to and vote again after you choose to do so.
So does this whole section 11 then go? It's because it's all about tie vote.
Yeah.
just the except in the case.
I don't think you'll have that. You will always have in order to take a vote, you're going to have a quorum. I mean, you could have an even number of people. I tend to agree making it simpler and removing it and leaving it to the board to determine if they do get a tie vote, it fails, and then they have to work harder on where they're going.
Like everybody does.
Jeremy, what do you
So it works on our board.
Yeah. You have to just stay with it.
Fight among
Do you agree?
So more discussion on this. Idaho Springs thoughts on that?
I'm just saying it already works in this fashion within the city. If it's a tie, it fails and we have to roll up our sleeves and, so I have no trouble.
I think another reason that it's bad is that it causes you to, if you start getting into a real strategic role where you're trying to want to get around each other or something like that, it gives you a chance to try to move a vote to try, somebody may be trying to achieve a tie so they can then get rid of certain people because they can see that if they get rid of those people, then they'll be able to overcome what's going on. And the idea that it shifts you into a mode of trying to play a chess game with each other as opposed to collaborate is not healthy.
I think what you mean to say is it could create that perception. So we're talking about striking paragraph 11.
No, I meant what I said, actually, I think.
Sorry, I was just making a joke. I'm not trying to.
Okay.
So I think it's the 11 is stricken. Jeanette and Lynette, anything like that, Mitch?
I think that works. It makes it a straighter process and you have an uneven number on the board. So
Good job stepping back, Mitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back button.
that's a good catch. I didn't get
Yeah.
that one.
All right, Laura, why don't you take this one away with, as we move to funding? Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, is this on me? Yeah, I guess it is on me. What I did here was based on the discussions that we had at the last meeting, I moved things around. I had removed parts of this paragraph, moved them to the other section, but essentially what I did is combined what is further down and this current paragraph. So I eliminated the redundancy to talk about essentially that in May 1st is the deadline I put, the authority is going to present, will send and provide, I should say, not present, but they will provide to the parties a report. I listed out from what was originally in here to take away redundancy, but to add some clarification as to what we would like to see in the report. I think it makes sense to have some specificity like this. First of all, it's a carryover from the earlier versions of the agreement, but it gives the roadmap to the authority as to exactly what it is we're going to be looking for, meaning the parties are going to be looking for. The only thing that suggestion I had that I believe there had been some discussion of was to put in some room that a party could reach out and ask for something specific as well. So I was going to, it's not here, but I thought I would adjust after H, some generic such as well as any matter that the party, requests information on 30 days in advance of the presentation of the report, or the presentation of the report or something like that. So that's food for thought.
I think that this is one where it's don't reflect my recollection. I
Okay,
think what we're talking about in paragraph 16, the deadline is September 15th. And there's only one thing in that report, which is the authority's anticipated funding request for the following budget year. And then everything else goes into that, the
Okay.
report delivered at the annual meeting.
so I have it reversed. So that's what I feared, is that I had them in the wrong place.
Is that, for the rest of the group, is that a similar understanding? That these are,
Yeah, I do recall May 1st being the change though, so.
Yeah, May 1st is the annual meeting. We discussed May as the date of the annual meeting, and then we moved it to June 1st. But
Okay,
that's, the annual meeting is in spring, and that has all of the reporting about what's going on with the fire authority. Funding is a functional thing that the municipalities need one piece of information, and it's the anticipated funding request for the following budget year. And it's largely an academic exercise based on what the assessor just delivered to the fire chief.
okay,
And the audit would be distributed to the members when it becomes available.
okay.
If that person still has the audit in the May, we don't have an audit till in July, if everything goes, lines up, and then sometime later, depending on.
so the September 15th date needs to return.
Okay, so I'm putting that in. I'm making a note here that the anticipated funding request language that's in the other paragraph goes here. And then what I'll end up doing then is likely taking the rest. What you see here is, well, do I leave? Oh, we're just doing the funding request, which means, do I have this then? Are we taking out the authority shall submit a report to each party on or before September 15th? Or do we just say by September 15th, they will provide the parties with the anticipated funding request and budget?
Peter, would it help? I think it might help if I screen share the notes that I have from the last meeting.
Sure. I will, I don't know, let's see. Are you able to share? If I stop sharing?
Megan, will you let me in just a second?
Yes.
Recording in progress.
And now, judge the accuracy of this for yourselves, but what I had here is what's highlighted there. All of this stuff should happen in May. Capital assets inventory, et cetera. It's between the two green lines.
Yeah.
Right? And then what's here that's green, this is the only thing needed in the new paragraph 16. And the date that we agreed on per that comment is October 15th. And I think that was just to take some of the pressure off the fire chief. Does this make sense? Does this match people's recollection? And then we wanted to stick with October. I don't know what to do with what is here. But otherwise, the new paragraph 16 would be what's bright green.
You shall submit a report to party on or before September 8th of each year, and together with the authority's anticipated funding request. Okay.
So the language doesn't quite work, but basically on October 15th, the fire authority submits the anticipated funding request for the following budget year.
So are you saying it does not submit a report because,
Just the funding request.
okay,
And then the report is for the annual.
Right.
Yeah. There's one report once a year that has everything in it.
And what number is that again? I jumped back and ends up lost it. Where
The-
that, where
the-
that extra report stuff, I know.
That's like 30s.
Yeah,
30.
39, page 10.
Thank you. I knew it was.
The only outstanding
Yes.
question, I think, and it's just because my notes are unclear, is do the municipalities or anybody else want to see the fire authority's proposed budget at any point during the year, or do we want to let the fire authority and its board build its budget without sending that draft to the jurisdictions?
and just so you know, as you look at these, you'll see that the on the copy that you have, not the one that's on screen, but the one that you have, the 38, is what George is saying. I need to switch these paragraphs back, is what I need to do, except for the dates. But essentially what I did is I had taken out all that meat in 38 and put it up at the top paragraph, and when in fact we wanted it back down here. So
if we're clear on 16, if everybody agrees that that's what we're trying to accomplish, and that you guys need to have draft budgets delivered to your jurisdictions, or are we going to let the fire authority board?
We don't.
It's on budget.
Typically, what I do is I let them know what their contribution is gonna be based on the assessed valuation, not based on our budget.
Right.
Okay.
So that date can actually be September 15th, because I know several municipalities start working their budget in September or earlier. So we can make October 15 be September 15.
So the date is September 15, and there is only one thing. Is that?
Yep.
Okay, then I'm gonna
Right with that,
take this up.
Andy? Okay, that's good.
And that one thing is not the report. It is the,
Anticipated funding request.
Anticipated funding request is the one thing. Cause that's how you'll build your budget.
okay. Peter, do you have what you need?
I do. I have exactly what I need.
Great. And that works for the fire authority timing wise, and it works for the parties timing wise as well. Okay,
It's September.
great.
Yeah, let's keep going then.
Yeah, Peter, what about it looks like there's some minor changes to just dates in 18? I don't think there's any change to 17 other than
In
making it-
17, George, your version should probably come down. Mine should go back up.
Yeah, I brought mine down and feel free to.
Let me share again. All right. So in 17, what is this part of 17? We added this language. This was what everybody had indicated last meeting that we needed something. This has to do with the annual contribution. We talked about what if somebody isn't going to be able to make their base contribution. The parties, and this is any of the parties, the party shall notify the authority of any reduction in their respective base contribution no later than October 30th of each year. The October 30th is the date that I had in my notes, but how does that work for the logistics? And does that language work?
That is in paragraph 18 on my copy.
Yeah.
Is that
Weird. Okay.
Is that the same for everybody else?
Just because we deleted that.
Oh, is
It's
it?
a numbering
Oh.
because.
Yeah.
We deleted 11.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so there you go.
18 on what we're looking at in front of us.
Okay.
And then the top of page 7, the parties shall notify the authority of any reduction in their respective base contribution no later than October 30th.
Is that the right date?
Is that the right date?
gives them 6 weeks after they got the budget request.
Yeah, I think it's lines up with us trying to get our budget done in November also, so. Or at least the first draft.
Okay.
What does that also allow enough time for the parties to have figured out their budgets? Because they do have to turn them in at least by October 15th. So presumably we would know that all the parties would know whether there's going to be a reduction at that point, even if their official budgets haven't been passed yet.
They have to be presented.
Yeah.
Get rid of the.
Okay. Idaho Springs? Yes.
I think that'd be fine for us.
All right. Sounds like our October 30th works for all parties involved.
Okay, great. The next change, again, I'm not sure what paragraph it is, but you'll see it's just a big red line that says, that's added language, all other parties. And you'll see this has to do with they may reduce their base contribution by the cost of administrative expenses. The paragraph prior to that talks about the ESD base contribution being reduced by collecting the revenues and all that. There was discussion about giving the municipalities the opportunity also to have that ability. Of course, there would be distinctions because the municipalities don't handle the treasurer's fees, the revenue collections, et cetera, et cetera. So I started with this, but I'm happy to expand upon it. I tried to define administrative expenses, but if we want to get more detailed, we certainly can.
Yes, first of all, I forgot my hearing, so I can hear most of you, but just letting you know. We need to add something there that only benefits Clear Creek Fire Authority. I mean, the fire authority just paid $14,000 for its costs, and which comes out of our budget. You know, $51,000 for administration fees, $21,000 for treasurer's fees. It's all deletes the budget, you know, and treasurer's fee, yeah, I can agree with that. Some of this, I don't know where it benefited the fire authority. I just like to see some limits or better language in here that says you can only take out for this or that. And I don't know what that language is. I'm not an attorney, but just want to see your thoughts on that.
This was raised at the last meeting.
I can hear him.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes I can hear him.
This was raised at the last meeting. The thing is that the fire authorities, the creation of these parties, the parties are contributing money. This has to do with how the contributions are determined, not how the fire authority manages its budget or determines its own expenses. The parties wouldn't credit back the fire authority for their administrative expenses. It goes into the total budget. So whereas I hear what you're saying, this has to do specifically with the parties' contributions.
Right.
And
they get X amount of money. They get receive X amount of money, which they forward to the fire authority. And if they take money out of that, then, I mean, we could have another half firefighter or another truck. That's my point, you know. Instead of giving 100% of X amount of sales tax or 90%, you know, take 10% off for administration fees. I understand that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm off base, but what I'm thinking.
Are you concerned that if a sales tax measure is passed, you'll see a similar percentage come off of the sales tax measure as we're seeing right now, what's coming out of the property tax? Is that your concern?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll say it again. Are you concerned that the amount that we're taking off the top of the property tax collections will also be taken off the top of the sales tax collections? Is that your concern?
Well, I guess so. I mean, at 8.6% on 1% sales tax, the county's treasurer will take $175,000.
I think that concern can be addressed by making sure that our rights established in paragraph 19 are with respect to our property tax collections. Property tax collection is done locally and it's complicated. Sales tax collection is done by the state and it's not. We just get the money. So does that, Peter, am I making sense to you? And John, is that acceptable to you?
No.
No?
The catch to that is that, of course, the towns are primarily sales tax based. So that principle would mean that their administrative cost would be negligible, that they would be able to charge us if you use that logic.
I just want to point out, there is no sales tax contribution in this IGA.
Right.
So all we're talking about is property tax and what the final contributions are based on the mills.
Well, except that the towns have a contribution. Am I not thinking clearly here? The towns have a contribution from their general fund, is that correct?
It's equivalent to the mills, but it isn't.
Yeah, that's where I'm
Yeah,
going at.
you're
How do
right.
you, if you're what I'm getting at is if you're primarily sales tax based and there's little administrative burden to collecting sales taxes and distributing them, then there would be little, using that same logic, there would be little reason for the towns to be able to have any kind of a substantial administrative fee. And I'm not advocating for that. I'm just stating it as trying to follow the logic on the one and then into the other,
Except for
from one
Silver
entity
Plume
to the
now.
other.
Silver Plume just passed a ballot measure this spring that changed their funding method to the mills. It's
And-
property tax based.
And because of that, those revenues, before they get to Silver Plume, have the treasurer's fee come off of them. Because all of the property tax revenues have that treasurer's fee come off of them. Does that follow?
Well, I hadn't thought it to that point, but it's, you need to kind of
It's already
evaluate,
happened.
yeah.
But there
That's
can
something.
still be some additional town administrative fee in collecting and dispersing funds after that's been taken off.
And that's the right we're establishing. Buddies.
I mean, I personally have thought about following on that same path. What if Georgetown went that route and we weren't taking our funding out of our general fund and it was coming out from a different source? The implications are there to have the same expense calculations apply to Georgetown's funding as well.
So if the thing happened that George is alluding to, that he was asking John about happened, which was we passed a sales tax measure for the fire district, then that would come in as sales taxes through the state. It would go through the treasurer's office. The administrative fee would be pulled off at the treasurer's office. And that would be this hand into that hand.
There are no treasurer's fees associated with sales tax revenues. The treasurer collects property taxes.
Oh, that's right.
I'm just trying
So-
to understand what the problem is that, and if I understand it, it's that one, that there's reimbursement for the administrative expenses. The actual cost of
Right.
the county to doing those, so that's record keeping, payment processing, audits, those kind of things. And that's at the appropriate level, that in terms of the cost recuperation, right? So that's the first issue, John. And then is that at the appropriate level? And then I guess I'm not sure about, given what the other issue is, because from what you said, it seems like it's high, right? But those are the costs. Those are the costs associated with administering this collection. And then what's the role of the municipalities do you have a chance to recoup
Administrative costs.
administrative indirect costs?
So
And I think
this-
the point that was made last meeting was that you spend a lot of money you have to document and address those. It's not just a number you pull out. So.
Sure. I also think that my recollection of our last meeting was that it would be helpful for the rest of us to have a better understanding of all of those administrative fees and the treasurer's fees if it was well itemized and provided to all of the parties. And I think I remember Brian saying, yes, we could do that. So.
What's in the report, right?
I need you to repeat that.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that you could provide an itemization of all of those administrative fees. So easy.
Yeah.
And, it just helps us understand what goes into that large number that seems high, but
Sure.
can all be justified and explained.
Yeah, definitely do that.
It also acts as a guide for the towns to be able to look and be able to use the same principles so that we're all being equitable in the way we do that. Because if we're saying that the towns do it too, see how we're doing it, then you can make sure you don't miss anything and you do the same thing in return.
And I think what I was hearing from John is the concern that greater administrative overhead means less budget for the authority.
Correct.
And so I'm hearing an interest in transparency all around about what the administrative overhead is that already exists from the county, an interest in making sure that parties also have the right to recoup some administrative costs while maintaining, just being wise with your budget and maintaining the understanding that this is overhead that would come out of authority spending money.
So the list is, the itemized list of those fees. And then, I think, Brian, you made the case that, and so it can give a parameters or a roadmap, but there's a study that needs to happen. I mean, it's not like you can, and so, but the right to do that, those are indirect fees can be recouped. Peter, what's your thinking on this?
So what I would do is I would probably add language to the paragraph that isn't edited that says the ESD's base contribution shall be reduced by the cost. I would add at the end of that paragraph that the ESD shall provide the other parties an itemized list of those costs. I'd like to have a date on that. When at the time of providing its base contribution information, it will provide the list or something like that. And then I would add a similar language that the parties shall provide to the other parties, basically each party shall provide to all other parties a list of their administrative expenses by such and such a time.
Should it be
Well,
October?
quarterly payments, I don't know if that'd be too much paperwork. When you turn that in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
you
I think
pay quarterly payments.
the
No.
ESD contribution is determined, I think, yearly.
Annually.
Would it,
Payments don't take much administrative, somebody's writing a check. When you're doing your budget and you're looking at the budget numbers, you're still not doing that much work because you get your mills, you do a couple calculations. I'm struggling to figure out what's gonna take that long. I'm not gonna submit any expenses. It's a very simple process for us. Even Silver Plume, they have more money coming from mills. That's still handled at the county level and they get the calculation so that there's not a lot that the towns do. We don't do nearly as much as what the county has to do. They do the work with the property tax. That information comes to us and it's a pretty simple calculation. There's not a whole lot that we do. I do the budget.
You make an
don't
important
see
point
how
because
much we really have to do. I don't think there's a lot. I would not take the time to itemize what we do because my time is more valuable
Well,
than trying to get that $20
The
back.
property tax calculation and all the work administration that goes along with that is a unique thing that is, it's unique to us. The sales tax calculation is something we would all have to do equally, including this, including the county and the municipalities. And so maybe that's a wash all the way around and it's kind of pointless. And that speaks to something I brought up in one of our previous meetings. It's like, if we're doing this, if it's something we all, if it's something like the sales tax and we all have to do it, and it's all pretty equal around the board relative to the size of it that we're doing. And if it took money out of operating revenues to where we had to increase the contribution anyway to offset it, then what was the point of doing it to begin with? Because we still end up paying the same amount of money at the end of the day. So it may not be worth doing. The sales tax calculation is something different though. And it is, but we have to, it's important that I think it's real important. We want the communities to know we're not trying to gain a financial advantage by doing that. So that transparency is super important.
I would just note though, if it isn't Silver Plume directly that is bearing the burden of those treasurers' expenses, if the county's doing it for them, the county will be charging them for that. Is that not correct?
It is correct. It'll come out, the treasurer will take any property taxes collected before it makes it to your jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yeah, and we, Lynette, you are correct. I mean, we did agree, Brian did say we can provide that listing. So I think I think there's no issue there. I was saying we could add it to the cities, but we don't even need the municipalities to have this number 19 if you guys don't want it. I had in my notes that we wanted something like that, but I will definitely add the list language as long as you guys give me a good date.
But where I was headed with that was if Silver Plume wants to recoup that out of their contribution towards the fire authority, why shouldn't they be able to do you follow me? I mean, or am I understanding the process wrong?
I think what I hear you saying, stated in a way that I think I understand is if you all have administrative costs associated with your participation in the fire authority, you should be able to document and recoup them. Okay. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I also, so I'm not I don't fully understand how the town of Silver Plume is going to be charged for the treasurer's expenses. And should that, if their contribution
Can
to the fire
recoup,
authority.
could recoup the treasurer expenses?
Correct.
They're not charged.
Same expenses coming out twice. That doesn't
Right.
make sense.
Well,
Yes, that's the key is they're
Okay.
not having to recoup. Silver Plume isn't extending any money out to pay these fees. All that's happening is that the ESD is reducing its contribution by the amount of those fees. So it's covered, but not by pulling anything out of anybody else's budget. So there's no recoupment for that standpoint. That would be.
They didn't have an expense.
There wasn't, yeah.
Is it helpful in that the treasurer's fee is separate from this $50,000 administrative fee? That's associated with our cost of participating in the fire authority. Right.
Okay.
And everybody has this.
We all have a cost of participating in the fire authority. I will note some paid staff from some other jurisdictions.
Sure.
And it's not like Brian's counting his time up. Or else our bill would be higher.
Good, a note for you. The administrative fee for this year on the last chart I got from Maria was 7.7% of the ESD revenue. So if everybody did 7.7%, based on this year's assessed valuation number, it would be $120,000, which is pretty close to $500,000. So we would have to increase either the mill we're asking for or
That's what I was
tax.
earlier.
Well, and I think that's I view that as something we're choosing to live with by supporting, continuing to move forward with an IGA model where you've got 5 jurisdictions at the table and we have to convene meetings like this to figure stuff out. Like this is just, it's like Prego, right? It's just in there. It's part of what we're competing.
So what about if it's included in, for the sake of transparency, an itemized list of the costs at the time of, or at whenever that good date is, and that based on this discussion, we don't include, that's what I'm hearing, that the parties provide to all other parties eligible administrative costs based on this discussion, because while there's a goal of transparency, a goal of legality associated with that, at least the list will be provided to give that perspective, which is different.
I agree. I think that's transparency is the key. And I think the right place to have that transparency is our annual interjurisdictional meeting. Right? I think that's the paragraph where you insert it and it says something like any jurisdiction that takes an administrative fee provides an itemization of that administrative fee at its annual meeting.
I'll also I guess just note that the parties shall notify the authority of any reduction in their respective base contribution. So couldn't, by October 30th, wouldn't that also be an expected
Part of that.
reduction in their base contribution?
Depends on where you want that transparency to live. Do you want it to show up at the fire authority board and then take effort to get to all the jurisdictions, or do you want it to be in a meeting like this? I think the maximum transparency is putting it into a meeting like this. And John, is this conversation going in the direction you wanted it to?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, on the annual report, all that stuff should be incorporated in the annual report, right? And everybody can view what everybody takes out.
Yeah.
And why,
And you can question us.
I was just wondering if there should be limitations or say your treasurer gets paid the same as your treasurer. Stuff like that, administration fees, your administrators are all the same. Should we have a schedule on that? Or is that too much detail?
So the only thing, George, is we have that annual meeting in June 1st of each year. And so I don't know that, whereas I think we can certainly discuss it at the annual meeting, I'm wondering why you would not define, since we're talking about costs in 18, wouldn't that be an appropriate place to say an itemized list will be provided to the parties?
So maybe in 18, it's provided to the fire authority board, and 38, it's
Included
included
in
to
the-
everybody. So we do both.
Well, if we get it by October 30th from everybody, all we do is incorporate it into the May meeting and present it as part of the meeting information that we can discuss in the group.
So that would just be part of the annual meeting.
Yeah, we can distribute that information as part of that meeting and have it as part of the discussion.
Yeah, but the thing is that the authorities' annual report, whatever is presented at the joint meeting is the authorities. The issue as to this administrative cost list seems to be something that's between the parties that they are concerned about, that they want to see the list of administrative costs for it. So I'm trying not, well, whereas it may be reflected in any budget or annual report that you provide as a deduction, it's not really in your report that should come, because your report's going to focus on the contributions you receive and then how you expend your budget. So I think we need to not conflate these two things. This is how the ESD's base contribution and then final ESD contribution is determined. And there was an ask for transparency about, because I think last year, if my memory's correct, it was like around $54,000 of a reduction in the ESD base contribution. So I think there's a request for clarity and for the county to be transparent as to, how much of that is legal, how much of that is finance work, how much of that is treasurer's And that's just something to be provided to the parties. The ESD, I mean, the fire authority certainly can be provided it as well, but this is an issue between the parties here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, I lost sight of the ball. Where are you suggesting this should be?
So I think 18
Oh.
should say the county shall provide, or the ESD shall provide an itemized list of the costs,
19.
It's 19 on your.
19 on your.
right, to the other parties. And I could say by October 30th, I think that's reasonable in light of our budget preparations, that would make sense.
It would
So-
be helpful, even though the fire authority is not a party to the agreement, to have that same information for budgeting purpose.
And
So
you would have it at that time, certainly.
Yeah.
is that agreement then? You're saying you agree?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just helpful to have that information.
Yeah, you would have that by the 30th, right?
Yeah.
Is everybody else agreed? It makes sense to me. And it can come up in the annual meeting if it needs to come up.
John, John, Chuck,
Pardon?
are you okay with that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
come October 30th, the parties will report to the authority about their base contribution and to the other parties about any administrative costs itemized.
At a timeline we can meet. The 2022 one, I'm looking at the date of the
Say it one more
2022
time.
report is August. So is that something that per our process we can meet a deadline?
Can you repeat it one more time?
On October 30th of any year, you would provide
Right.
the information of any reduction in your respective base contribution to the authority, and then you would provide the itemized list of administrative fees to the other parties.
You got it.
And therefore, we've already completed this work for our coming budget year.
Correct.
And the parties can, should they take administrative costs, can that same deadline is workable for you all?
So if we could just not jump to that, because I'm
Okay.
not sure there's agreement on that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
we're going to include that language. So if we could just go back to the itemized list date.
October 30th.
Yeah, so that's what are we good with that? Because George just mentioned something about August, but it would make sense to provide it at the same time. Plus, the budget's presented to the board, the ESD board, / county commissioners, October 15th, in terms of they must have it in hand. So that'll be calculated all around that time.
Yep. We got a thumbs up from George as
Okay.
well. I don't know if the
And then-
camera caught that.
And then this idea about the parties providing additional, sort of to all the rest of the parties about eligible expenses. We're not going to pursue that. We're not going to include that.
But are we going to pursue the administrative expenses language at all for those parties? That number 19, because as Jeanette was pointing out,
20.
she's not going to do that. I'm sorry, 20 on yours, yeah. Jeanette was saying they're not going to have any admin expenses that would take the time to do. So do we even need to include that? Because it's fine.
Just like Idaho Springs or Georgetown, do you anticipate those costs? Or
Yeah,
Idaho
haven't.
Springs, no.
I guess I don't see, I do see ramifications for the fire authority itself if a municipality decided to do that.
Mhm.
I could see a municipality deciding to do that if they were in particularly dire straits on a year's budget. And if they needed to give them the ability to do it. I understand your thought process, and I can hear my treasurer saying, yeah, I think the same. Is it worth the time for me to calculate? So, but having it in there and available I don't know.
So similar to, oh, Brian, did you?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I would hope it's done based on the actual work that happens related to the fire authority work as opposed to having a typical budget year, right?
So whether the budget year's good or bad.
Good or bad,
It would
Yeah.
be the same amount of work.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. In which case it probably doesn't need to be there. Mary? What's your thought?
I'm kind of thinking through this too. I mean, so does it hurt us if we leave it in there? You know, we're saying right now that we're not gonna do it. We're probably not gonna do it. I can't say that 100% because I'm not Mary Sims, you know, the other Mary. But to have that opportunity, how is it turning around and biting us if we leave that in there?
I think John's concern that he voiced in the initial part of this conversation is that it would ultimately reduce the budget of the authority.
I understand that, but you know, that, I mean, in our budget, we separate, I think it's the management allocation or, you know.
Exactly.
So
What one department does for another department, you know.
we may not be looking at it
as treasurer like
sensitive as our treasurer is, and I don't want to take away that opportunity or totally change that. Yeah, you know, I know we're gonna come back and we're gonna sign off and agree on this, but I want to leave that door open until we could get confirmation, I guess. I think having the option to leave it in here and we choose not to do that. And the fire authority is gonna know what we're gonna give them anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
What are we
Okay.
keeping in?
20 and.
Probably 20.
We're keeping old 20, new 19.
Keeping all other parties may reduce their respective base contribution by the cost of their administrative expenses, so on and so forth. Adding that those parties would also be responsible for a report
Right.
of itemized expenses by October 30th.
Correct.
If you're making a deduction, you gotta give a report that's
Right.
that's why you made the
Eligible
deduction,
expenses.
justifies it, and then it's subject to question by everybody's
Everybody.
subject to being questioned by the board, just to maintain equity, just to make sure that people all getting the same thing.
So that same reporting language is gonna appear in both of those paragraphs.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Awesome.
You'll see the deletion of the language, following that, the next language, the final ESD contribution will be compared with ESD's base contribution, et cetera, et cetera. That was agreed to be stricken at the last meeting. I simply have left in that strike through rather than accepted at this point, but it's not really, I don't think there was any reason to keep it in. I think the discussion was not to keep it in. So that's why it's there. Unless somebody has something to raise about it, we can move on.
Anyone? Move on.
Okay.
Wait.
I added this language here, which again, I can't tell what paragraph you see. versus-
23.
Okay.
On the screen, it's 22.
On the screen is 22.
Should the voters of Clear Creek County approve a public safety tax during the term of this agreement, the ESD may contribute a portion of the revenue received from that tax to the authority. The purpose of putting this in is simply to make it clear, because we have no real provisions that allow for the ESD to make a contribution unrelated to mills, whereas we understand that the municipalities are taking out their general fund, they're supported heavily by the sales tax. You know, that's not as much an issue for municipalities as it is for the county to donate sales tax revenue. That's why we call it public safety tax. So I added that in there. I believe there was agreement to add such language last time, but that's that change. If anybody has any comments or thoughts.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Would there be any time where you would have the public safety tax and not give some of it to fire authorities? So not that we're trying to figure out a percentage, but it
Right.
says may instead of shall.
Yeah, it says may because reasonably speaking, any public safety tax that the county pushes, it's not the ESD that puts the public safety tax out, it's the county that would put that on the ballot. It likely will specify for the community that a portion of this tax a certain portion, and we may even put percentages if we're thinking ultimately to do it, but how I've seen it with some other counties is they say, 18% will go to the sheriff's office, 18% will go to support fire suppression services. If they have a fire authority, they say that. Certain amount goes to ambulance, the remainder will go to such, and it lists out all these different public safety uses. So I don't want to say that the ESD shall contribute a portion of the revenue at this point, because one, we don't have that public safety tax. And there's no determination that the ultimately in pushing a public safety tax, I don't know at this point what the board or likely a subsequent board would end up agreeing to how they want to use that, how they want to fashion that. So I don't want to obligate us to use a portion on that. So that's why
is it possible, Peter, that, for example, public safety tax might be passed specifying a special use for it? It's, to solve a problem in one place, whether it was ambulance or something like that, and that would be characterized as a public safety tax?
Yeah, so you wouldn't have, you can only have one public safety tax. You would have to amend whatever, if one was adopted, you'd have to change it under the statute. And the maximum, of course, is a 2% tax. So no matter how you would do it, it would be the same tax. We would expand the uses if need be. Obviously we're vague here in that we contribute a portion. I just don't know if any board is willing at this point, if the current board is willing to obligate for a future board. I don't think it can.
We've got two hands here.
Go ahead.
John,
So I get it clear in my mind, this will be a separate tax from the 1% sales tax we're gonna ask for the fire authority?
No, we're talking about the same thing.
It'll be the same?
We're talking about the same thing. Yeah,
Public safety tax.
Okay.
the public safety tax is
So what percentage will fire authority get? Do you know, or?
we haven't.
Yeah,
We'll figure that out once we sign the ID.
no.
You don't have one right now.
So that just decreases what the fire authority is gonna get? By EDS taking out their public safety? I'm just trying to get this clear in my mind, I'm just thinking out loud.
This is additional.
Yeah, the public safety tax, that its purpose would be to fund, in my mind, help fund all three, not just the fire authority,
Yeah,
right? So there's a
Right,
portion
right.
would go to the fire authority, a portion is coming to EMS, portion is going to our
so.
sheriff's office.
Yeah. Well, municipalities should be able to ask for the same thing.
Counting too.
Say again?
Municipalities should be able to ask for the same thing on that ballot.
That's up to the municipalities.
So I think,
Would hope we would,
If-
I would hope we're not on the same ballot. but-
The county's
really,
public safety tax. I'm just trying to understand this.
the purpose would likely be for the purpose of funding in part the fire authority, but it may be for the purpose of trying to solve all of those at the same time. And in addition to that, the purpose could also be, and it wouldn't be specified because we can't encumber a future board. But in addition to that, I believe since it's a county-wide tax. Am I correct with that?
Yeah.
Would have.
Because of that, a portion of it has to be remanded back over, would hopefully would be remanded back over to the benefit of the east end of the county, which isn't in this fire district, them to be able to use within that area as well, because they'd be taxed over in that area, even though they're not part of the fire district. So all those things have to be balanced.
Peter, anything more to add in terms of clarity?
I,
This is about
Correct me
bringing
if I'm
more,
wrong on
this is
anything I
about
said.
bringing more resources.
Yeah,
This is where we started this, which is that in the mission CIT report, it would be that it would bring more resources to the fire along with the other approved uses.
so just for clarity's sake, the intent of number 23 here is to make sure if there were a public safety tax, some of that money can be allocated to the fire authority. It doesn't,
That's why it was presented, so the county
yeah,
has a legal right
because,
to give the authority sales tax money,
yes,
which they currently do not have by how the agreement was written. That's the whole purpose of this.
Yeah. So this would just be
Allowing us to do.
allowing more
Yeah,
money
Yeah.
Providing
and
the
not
option to do.
providing any option to reduce.
And the
Is that,
specifics aren't there because that's would be based off of what the voters would approve.
Yes.
Right.
and John, I think the thing that I want to make sure, because I think your question, any ballot measure we propose would necessarily have to also tax the residents of the municipalities.
Right, yeah,
And-
just want to make sure.
Yeah, okay.
and George, you had a hand up as well.
Yeah, I have a separate comment, which is, I want this language to be more agnostic with respect to the specific tax measure. Instead of a public safety tax, what if we find or earn another tax option as a county? And decide as a group that that's what we want the county to do. I would rather than it say approve a public safety tax, I would say any revenue source dedicated to fire protection.
Or
You mean like
well,
a-
like a sales tax.
Isn't it?
Or to public safety or something like that, yeah. Yeah,
I buy off on public safety revenue.
or
So that's
available,
broader than a
maybe not
tax.
dedicated,
What's-
but available.
Revenue versus tax.
I mean, revenue just lets it be any kind of tax, right? And like,
Right. And that's, yeah.
so that's the change I'm looking for.
Revenue.
A public safety revenue or
Instead of,
a revenue?
I think he wants to take out public safety based on the fact that who knows if there are going to be other type of tax opportunities or other fees that the legislature down the road
Yeah,
offers that would mean that we wouldn't go necessarily for a public safety tax, we would go for something else, if I'm understanding that.
Yeah, I think I understood. Is it possible, Peter, to say something like any revenue source available to public safety or to fire protection, one of those two terms?
legally usable.
Yeah,
But why not a public safety tax or other, or alternative revenue source?
I could live with an or.
Encompasses
yeah, that works.
all of the above.
Okay, so now I'm gonna turn it around. Okay, so that's fine, because
I know.
show the voters.
Any money we get.
Yeah, the voters, yeah.
And I mean, let's keep in mind that the state could give us some kind of fee authority.
Yeah.
Right.
As well.
We're working on revenue diversification. You know?
And we're optimistic enough, we're talking about it right now.
Okay,
do
I should
you,
have brought glasses.
so now let me throw this out to the electeds. Do you feel that, I think that any revenue source, when we talk about that, we do mean a tax of some sort as opposed to. What I want to make sure is, I have language in here that says, should the voters of Clear Creek County approve a public safety tax? And, or the revenue, or well, I'll change this, a revenue source, something, blah, blah, blah. I'm wondering if I may just change that to should Clear Creek County decide to dedicate the revenue of a public safety tax or other revenue source. I think I'm going to do that so we don't get caught up on the voters of Clear Creek County either.
Yeah, because I mean, what if CDOT decides tomorrow that they want to take us up on our request that some of the fine revenue off the highway make it to the fire authority? And what would that mechanism look like? And if it ends up going through the county, we want the authority in this agreement without amending it to get it there. Right? So we just want this to contemplate in a really broad way that any revenues that are eligible for contribution to the fire authority, we can do it per the agreement.
But then you need to still include the voter option, because that might be one, or these alternative sources. So we don't want to exclude.
The county won't be able to provide a tax without voter approval.
Right.
So
You
it's
don't really have to state it
Yeah.
as being
Yeah.
voter approved. Because
It will be
it's
voter
required.
approved. It's just saying a voter approved tax for these purposes can be distributed.
That's
Well,
why
we
I think
started to
keeping it
say
general is
initially,
better.
so if it was important enough to say it in the initial paragraph, and now we're expanding it to include these other.
Yeah, but I am changing the should language and changing some of that around. So I actually, I understand what you're saying. I think that we do not need to do that, it is implied. So I'm gonna say public safety tax or other revenue source.
Yes, I think that's the right change, is just to add the words or any other revenue source.
May dedicate additional revenue
that
to public safety tax or other
make
revenue
sense?
source during the
Okay.
term of this agreement. I don't need this part.
It could be a donation. I could win the lottery and decide to make a big donation.
To buy a ticket?
No,
Can't win if you don't.
Can't win.
I did.
Oh, good.
can't win if you do better.
You're only slightly more
It's not
likely
true.
to win.
Like a 0.0000 chance.
Okay.
And I think what I'm going to do is, the other thing is I'm going to say Clear Creek County or ESD, because depending on how the money, it sounds so, depending on how the funds are apportioned out and then paid out, may be affected by what kind of tax, what comes in. So I think I'll say Clear Creek County or at ESD, if that works for everybody else.
Yeah, just maximum flexibility for us to identify revenue.
Okay.
Okay, I want to be mindful of time here. We have about 15 minutes left of.
And
The
we are basically through everything, because this part here, which is probably 39 for you, but 38 on the screen.
Yep.
We've already essentially talked about. Everything that you see stricken through is actually going to be moved up to where it was taken out of, put back there. This will have the language that will basically, hold on, now I'm confusing myself.
Okay, so on our report, what was added, or like our printed out version, what was added in 16 will actually be placed 39.
Yeah, that's right.
And Peter, when you first went over that, you mentioned that you wanted to also add an I, which was as well as any matter requested 30 days in advance, 60 days in advance. So I wanted to make sure we revisited that as well.
Okay.
So is everybody on the same 2 pages that we're kind of looking at?
Is that what it is down to now?
I'm gonna remove the strike through here. I'm just gonna reject this strike. No.
There's some slight modifications, though, I think.
Right.
There are some minor differences between what you added to 16 and what you struck through 39.
Yeah, that's true. I did. So I'm gonna just go back up here and we can refer to it. So, and
George,
I have a process suggestion,
okay.
which is that Peter does his best to make sure 39 is comprehensive. And that we all know that when it comes down to our individual jurisdictions we're gonna have a review period. Right? You guys come up with something that you want to be in here. Let's just have the general understanding amongst us that more is better. And if you want something in here, we're gonna accept it.
In terms of
So that we don't have to figure this out today. And like, as you guys go review, if you come up with something else you want, we're just gonna accept it.
in terms of the joint meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that you're gonna make it as expansive and as inclusive as necessary for the purposes of meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Without,
So what I'd suggest is allow me to work on this and bring it back for the next meeting where I think it'll be clearer based on now what I understand. That's all I'm saying. Rather than going into necessarily the detail of these specifics, I don't know that, I think we could probably wait till the next meeting to do that one.
and you will you include that, any matter requested?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess
I've
while
made
we're
it-
here and have the authority, would 60, 30 days for an additional matter to be requested? Is there like a
Days is fine.
30 days is fine with the authority?
Okay.
Okay. Just want to nail that
No,
one.
that's terrific.
And then that leaves scheduling for next meeting, as we mentioned, a next meeting.
Yeah. Do we need another meeting? We want to take Peter's comments and edits. I mean, my suggestion would be to have a clean version of this, of course, similar to this, that you can track it. For you to go through a period of review with your bodies, your elected bodies, governance bodies. And then if there's substantive, and I would say maybe I don't know what the right schedule is for that, but then if there's substantive changes or topics for us to discuss, then we have another meeting of this body, and if not, we look to confirm electronically. Is that too much, or should we say, do we want to have another meeting? My understanding is that we're very close on this, at least conceptually. That the devil is in the detail, and you're gonna need time to review and have it reviewed by others. And the question would be kind of what's the timing around this? But I don't see a need for having another meeting with a clean version of this until you've had a chance to do a full review and you've had a chance to talk with your governing partners.
That's a good suggestion.
But if we were to set a meeting that would give us that deadline and save that time frame in case we do need to come back, rather than trying to convene the group and decide what's the best time.
Fair enough.
So-
Cancel.
Fair enough, and it could just be a celebratory acknowledgement type of meeting.
So we won't be meeting here, we'll be meeting at the bar.
So I'm hearing a suggestion of a meeting hold that we can
Yes.
make sure we have dedicated time.
Just in
But-
case.
I'm gonna suggest there's something we put on that agenda that we know we're gonna want. Which is, like, we need to continue to meet to design our revenue proposal.
Mhm.
And we're gonna need to continue to meet. I would like to see this body continue to meet until the Board of County Commissioners put something on the ballot at least. And so are we looking at the last week of October? Is that,
So we say the 30th?
Wanting this to be completely signed, say I'm in November. I'm trying to count backwards now. I was thinking our October meeting is when we were gonna need to have them go through it and vote. But if we have changes, are we waiting one more time to see if other groups had changes? We're gonna put it in front of our boards in October.
When are your October meetings?
Mine's on the 15th, mine's the third Tuesday.
Idaho.
Everybody's gonna have different.
Second, fourth Monday.
On the 29th.
The fourth Monday, second and fourth Monday. Okay.
And they're
And Georgetown is second and fourth Tuesday.
Either way, I think.
But the early, so it sounds like the earliest one is next Monday, but it won't be shown there. And then after that, the earliest is the 15th.
And ours would be the 22nd.
Yeah.
So last week of the month, if we're looking at this body, can I suggest either the 30th or 31st?
31st.
I like
No.
No?
That's
Halloween.
Why not?
No, too.
Well, That's,
There's stuff
is
here.
that a high holiday then?
We can't meet here on the 31st, but we can still meet. Right? We can meet at the Wellness Center or an
Is
Empire.
there Halloween efforts here, Beth?
What's going on?
Then let's not do the 31st because you're pulling too much staff away then.
What's going on 31st?
Halloween.
Yeah.
In,
Out of the office too, by the way.
Well, that's why the party's gonna be so good.
Yeah.
That boss is here, won't be here.
Yeah.
Right.
I,
kind of should meet.
Idaho Springs is good on the 30th, if you want to meet on the 30th.
That works.
We have a meeting on the
30th?
30th. We have a planning commission on the last
The
Wednesday.
elections.
Oh, that's right.
So 30th, can't be here, can be at the Wellness Center.
I
Is
can't
that-
do 30th.
You can't do the 30th.
Is it,
Well, I can't do it at night. Sorry, I was assuming a nighttime meeting.
1 o'clock.
If we're doing it in the day, that's a different
Let's
thing.
go back to the 31st.
We don't want to do the 31st because that's Halloween and
Okay.
the kids come by.
Okay.
30th at 1 o'clock?
Your daytime, yeah, on the
Daytime,
30th.
30th.
Oh, all right.
That works.
See, you're right.
Yes.
Good.
I do have an ask before we conclude. So let me know when it's time that I can ask.
30th at 1 to 3:30?
does that give people time to review a revision, load it by their board?
But if you have something, we'll bring it.
No.
We're not asking your boards to take action on that, but
Right.
to
But
get
to take a
feedback.
look.
To get feedback and bring that feedback
Yes.
here. And on the 30th,
Yeah.
here's the IGA, here's feedback, we make changes as appropriate. And then you take it to your boards for approval, and as soon as that is possible.
From when to when, you said?
It'd be at the 31st.
The 30th.
The 30th.
30th?
The
30th is from 1 to 3:30, but then you would take it, that revised, and our hope is that there's not substantive changes. I hope, the hope is that the other parties who haven't been part of these discussions can be brought along, they can understand sort of the thought process and also, and we have some of those slides about how we got here, how all of those things, if it's helpful to kind of understand the context of the IGA piece, whatever you might need to help to support that. But what we look to do is to make final revisions on the 30th based off of input from your governing bodies.
And we're doing this in your city hall?
At the health clinic.
Health clinic?
We can offer the Wellness Center. Doesn't have to be there.
Okay.
Okay,
And then we'd adopt the first half of November, most likely,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, that kind
Yeah.
of, oh, okay.
And that works, the November timeframe works.
I can't be here on the
I
30th.
feel like that was a little later than we had kind of planned, but.
No, I think adoption can occur as late
As-
as mid-December. The key is being on the same page. Ideally, we would love to have them all adopted by the end of November, but I don't know that that's required. That still gives you all a few weeks to get to it.
But it does create an obligation between now and the 30th for you really to get in front of, not for a decision, but for content review and just make sure that that's anything that we need to discuss on the 30th is.
Officially adopted on the
I
28th.
see a bunch of heads nodding.
Council.
Peter, what's your request?
Okay, so this I think would be directed to Brian perhaps and Jeremy. We need a final map to be used as an exhibit of those 3 unincorporated areas, one that we are comfortable with. The second thing is, Kelly, you said you were going to provide me with an updated inventory of all the assets and what is currently Exhibit A in the agreement. and I still need that. We need an updated Exhibit A.
It's current. And I've been contemplating requesting that the 2 trailers and the hazmat van that are ESD assets, if we can transfer those over to fire authority, because they're the hazmat van is basically a storage shed. It doesn't run. And the 2 trailers, one is wildfire trailer and the other is doing hazmat duty.
So that would be.
And they're very low value assets.
So
That's the last 3 items.
revisions to Exhibit A.
It could be if,
How long have you had them in your possession?
One's 1993 and one's shortly thereafter.
You basically own them already.
Yeah, you can't depreciate them anymore from a business.
So I'm kind of wondering if we should do that with all the assets. I mean, it's funny you bring that up because I was just looking at our list and there are
1952
2 very old
Rolling
assets.
stock.
And if we're gonna go do that with ESD, maybe we
Yeah.
should think about doing that with all the remaining
I'm fine with
assets.
that.
Because they are low value, they're old assets for the most part.
With the notable exception being the fire stations.
yeah, just
Oh,
roll.
correct. I'm sorry. Yes, the rolling stock.
To bring this further, it was
Thank you.
Georgetown. There's assets on there also. From
So I-
84, so.
I should be able to adjust that then, and I'll provide that to Kelly. And then the last thing is, Kelly, I'd mentioned the pension provision in the IGA.
Yes.
I can make changes that I think are appropriate, but you're going to want to run them by Bob Cole.
Yeah, I've already talked to him briefly about that.
Okay,
So he'll be expecting something.
okay.
Is that something that needs to be done in advance of the 30th?
I'll be able to get it done next week anyway, so it will be, but I'll reach out to Bob if I don't get an immediate. It's literally just saying, do we need to update the names that are in here of what's referenced? It won't really be a huge substantive change because I think the intent is very clear of the pension.
I do think that especially the map, the exhibit B is an important part to have and have agreement on as well. So Kelly or Jeremy.
Ryan, did you get?
Yes, I did. I've got it. So I'll get with our GIS.
The QR code is live, so all Matt Taylor needs is a QR code to access that in his mapping program, because I didn't, live, so.
Okay.
That's my sheet that's been pulled data off of mapping.
Okay.
Is that
It's more, I can happily sit down with you.
Is that exhibit gonna be something, is that available to the parties too? Also,
I mean, we can email the one that he's already sent out because for purposes of.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So I'll just say before we wrap, thank you, Peter, for your great work. Thanks for the discussion and the review and the raising of those questions. And I think you should be proud of how far you've gotten today and
Yeah.
over the course. So let's bring this home on the 30th. Peter, when do you think you'll have a chance for a clean review for the parties here to kind of start to share around? Is that end of next week or what?
Yeah, I love that you said end of next week. I was about to say middle of next week, and then I would be over promising. So end of next week is awesome.
Good with all of your agenda deadline.
Right, and so just to be really clear about the expectation is that you'll get a clean copy and you're gonna put that in front of whether it's a planning committee or your at folks, so that we come to this meeting with comments to the extent that we can identify what those are in advance of that. That'll make this meeting go a lot better and
the later approval.
Yep.
So Peter, is the end of next week like Wednesday or something?
That's right. So, and Jonathan, are we looking for, so the version I was going to provide would still have one section that may be redlined, which is just those 2 funding paragraphs that I'm switching around. I can put them in the final form, and if you guys don't like it, you can just let me know. Then you're working with documents that aren't redlined.
I think it's best without red line. You always can go back to the previous versions
Right.
about what did we talk about, but
Agree. Send it
so
clean.
send it clean, you know,
Okay.
do what do they, you know, sort of do a palate cleanser, look at it fresh.
Okay.
Sorbet.
So let's send a clean version.
Okay, great, thank you.
Andy.
I think Idaho Springs is gonna go ahead and have this reviewed by our attorney. So that way, if any of the entities have, their attorneys have any concerns, which is probably unlikely, but if they do, we can address those by the 30th too, because we don't want that to get hung up.
Yeah, just it'd be an extra step later is all anyway, so it's good.
Do you want me, I'm glad you brought that up, Andy. I was going to ask if you wanted me to just, once I send it out to all of you, also send it to Carmen for Idaho Springs, Jerry for Georgetown, and Bob for the Fire Authority.
It's fine.
You know, it was really helpful. I know when we were looking at those governance options, Peter, you held a meeting with them, right? And you kind of walked that through them. You know, if, you know, maybe let's just keep that in mind if there are issues that come up. But, you know, I think, you know, in terms of directly sending it to them, does that work for the time being? The clean version?
I think, you know, I don't know, Empire, you want yours to go.
I can
and
send
then
mine to,
Silver Plume
I'll send it to
too.
my guy.
Yeah, yeah, if it goes to,
This is in addition to the expectation. It's not just your boards that we want to review this, it's your legal counsel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for
Ed,
that.
I don't know who your legal counsel is, or I would have offered to do that as well.
That's okay. I can send that along too. I actually had a name change on the page where we sign ours, but I didn't think that was worth bringing up. I will be
Okay.
emailing you, no worries.
If you can send it to me though separately, and I'll make that change.
That works.
I had it highlighted actually because I had you listed as town clerk, and I know you're not, but I don't know who the town clerk is that signs it.
That was who I was gonna send.
I
to you.
fixed it on the last version, but it
Okay,
didn't
yeah,
get
Jennifer
updated.
Boswell, I was signing, but I'll email that to you. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
Mark scaling stuff.
Yeah. I'm good to close this meeting.
They sent a note out.
Yes, thank you, Megan.
Yes, you are. Thanks, Megan.
Okay, bye.